Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Before we get started, I'm trying something new with my setup for my camera, so if the quality is different, and hopefully it's better, but if it's worse, I apologize. I'm just trying to get better quality videos overall, so hopefully this works. But in today's video, we are going to be continuing down the list of the 50 best horror movies that you've never seen, with number 41 for us, but number 28 on the list, Halloween 3: The Season of the Witch. Halloween 3: The Season of the Witch came out in 1982 and was written and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. Now this is technically part of the Halloween franchise. It's technically number 3. It follows Halloween and Halloween 2, but this movie is a little bit different in the fact that it doesn't have Michael Myers in it. But before we get more into that, let's start with a quick synopsis of the movie. Halloween 3 is centered around Dr. Daniel Chalice, who grows suspicious of the Silver Shamrock mask-making company after one of his patients is murdered in his bed, and then the man who murdered him ends up committing suicide by setting his car on fire. Ellie Grimbridge is the daughter of the man who was murdered in the hospital, and she pairs up with Dr. Chalice to try to come to the root of her father's murder. Her father was carrying a mask made by the Silver Shamrock Company whenever he was murdered, so they have that as their first clue. They go to the town that hosts the Silver Shamrock factory, and they come to find that Connell Cochran, the guy who runs the company, is trying to basically take over Halloween and use his masks to create a mass murder of tons of children on Halloween night. Now, as I said, this movie is technically part of the Halloween series, but isn't about Michael Myers. And that was originally because John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, the two people who created Halloween, felt that Halloween 2 pretty much told the story of Michael Myers and really didn't need to continue. When they originally created the Halloween movie, they didn't anticipate it to become such a huge blockbuster hit that spawned tons of movies and became just a staple for scary movies. They really just wanted to create a fun slasher, and within days of the original Halloween being released, they were already signed on to create a second movie starring Michael Myers. Now, John Carpenter's original plan was to do an anthology series with his Halloween movies. Basically, he would release a new Halloween movie every year, but the actions in the movie wouldn't be related. The characters would be new, the story would be different. It was basically just a way to release a fun horror movie for the Halloween season every year, but not having to continue the same story. And Halloween 3: The Season of the Witch was sort of the first version of that. John Carpenter didn't want to stretch Michael Myers' story out because he felt like he had done what he needed to do. He didn't want to do something where he was constantly escaping death. They purposely set him on fire in the second movie is to be he's done, he's dead, it's over and done with, his story has ended. Now, the issue with that is they didn't necessarily warn audiences of this mindset before putting this movie out. So audiences went into theaters thinking Halloween 3, we're gonna see another movie with Michael Myers, and whenever no Michael Myers showed up, people left the theaters pissed. It got terrible critic ratings, it got terrible audience reviews because there was no Michael Myers. They weren't expecting it to be a completely different story but under the same realm. The movie's overall budget was about $2.5 million, and after all the box office money, it did raise about $14.4 million, but it's still one of the lowest grossing Halloween movies to date. It did terribly compared to the others because people were so outraged that they advertised another Halloween movie without Michael Myers. The only time Myers even shows up in this film is on the TV at a bar advertising the Halloween movie as part of a Halloween spectacular special that channel was doing. So in this world, the Halloween movies exist, but just as movies. Michael Myers is just a made-up character. Now, there was a small percentage of people who liked this. There's people who thought the Michael Myers story was done, it was over, it ended, and that they could move on to something different like this. And those people were the ones that really held on to this film and made it just kind of a cult classic today. And it's one of those movies also that now that some time has passed, people are starting to realize that this movie shouldn't have been given such poor ratings like it was. It's not the movie's fault that it's sort of tied into this world of Michael Myers where it doesn't necessarily belong. And a lot of people don't even consider this part of the Halloween series. It's just sort of its own separate film. When you look at the list of Michael Myers movies, it goes from Halloween 1 and 2, then skips all the way to 4 where Michael Myers returns. And honestly, I think the movie itself is a pretty successful horror movie just in on its own. It's kind of one of those fun movies that is based around Halloween, so you can watch it during October around Halloween time, and you kind of get into like the spirit of Halloween, and it revolves around costumes and masks. So it's really just everything that we know about Halloween kind of smashed into one movie. But it also has this like supernatural sci-fi kind of twist. There are robots, there's like some witchcraft, there's like ancient lore, so it's completely different to what we've seen with other Halloween movies with the Michael Myers character. And as I said, Dr. Chalice and Ellie are the two people who are going to sort of figure out what's going on with the Silver Shamrock Company. The company makes 3 trademark masks, a witch, a skull, and a pumpkin, which they advertise to children on Halloween. It's supposed to be like the hot commodity of the year. Everyone wants one of these masks, and each one comes with a Silver Shamrock medallion that's like stuck on the back of it as like their trademark logo. And the goal is to try to get every kid in America, or at least like the majority of the children, wearing one of these masks, and then at 9 o'clock on Halloween night, there's going to be a big spectacular special with Silver Shamrock where they will announce one of the mask buyers is going to be a winner of a big prize. And they encourage kids to sit down at the TV at 9 o'clock wearing their masks to watch the program. Ellie's father runs a toy shop where he does sell some of these masks, and his death happens only a few days after visiting the town of Silver Shamrock and coming back with his shipment of masks. As I said, he died holding one of the masks in his hand. So that's sort of the only clue that they have that maybe Silver Shamrock isn't everything that it's saying it is. And when they go to the town, things just are sort of weird. There's like a curfew that happens where after a certain amount of time, like a siren goes off and everyone has to be inside. And the Silver Shamrock factory has these like henchmen that sort of almost run the town. Everyone's sort of afraid of them. No one really talks badly about Silver Shamrock and the owner. It's just sort of, you don't say anything. The whole town's sort of under this like, we just don't ask questions, you just don't say anything kind of situation. And Connell Cochran, the guy who runs the Silver Shamrock factory, turns out to be not the nicest guy. And the closer that Dr. Chalice sort of gets to figuring out what's going on, Connell Cochran sort of fills him in that he wants to essentially take back Halloween. He says that Halloween has been reduced to nothing but us dressing our children up and having them beg for candy, when it originally was part of like All Hallows Eve, and there's a lot of rituals that go behind it, which is true. Halloween has sort of become more commercialized because that's what America does, but there is a lot of tradition and history based around the original All Hallows Eve. And basically Connell Cochran wants to take that back and seek revenge on America and the consumerism of it all. So he stole a piece of Stonehenge and has it in this factory and is using the powers of that to put into the chips that he puts on the medallions that go on the mask the children wear. Following? Okay. And his henchmen are all robots that he created that kind of just do his bidding, and anyone who gets close to figuring out his secret gets murdered, and that's why they think Ellie's father was killed. The last thing her father says is they're going to kill us all. He's death gripping this mask, so it only leaves the question of did he sort of find out what the plan was, and then Cochran sent one of his henchmen after him. And this is sort of later solidified because after going through the wreckage of the fire, because as I said, the guy who killed Ellie's father then set his car on fire, there was no body found, no bone fragments, no teeth, nothing, just car parts. And then further into the movie we find out that they're finding parts that don't belong to a car and they can't really figure out what they belong to, and that's around the time that Dr. Chalice finds out that the henchmen are really robots, so you can kind of make the connection there that his henchmen were sent to kill Ellie's father and then make it look like he committed suicide as like a sort of suicide murder situation. But really the whole time, Dr. Chalice and Ellie are counting down and trying to stop Cochran before Halloween night, 9 o'clock, because that is whenever he's going to set off all those masks and essentially murder millions of children across the country. And throughout the entire film, there is a song, the jingle of Silver Shamrock, going on in the background, counting down to the day of Halloween. It starts out when there's 8 days left till Halloween.
8 more days to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. 8 more days to Halloween, Silver Shamrock. 8 more days to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. 8 more days to Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
And that song plays 14 different times throughout the entire movie, counting down until it is Halloween. It's sort of the kind of song that's meant to get stuck in your head, and it's supposed to have sort of a almost like hypnosis ability to it. Like a pumpkin shows up on the TV and starts flashing, and part of making that music, which is something that Tommy Lee Wallace did himself, he created the jingle and sort of like the theme behind it, it loses value when you watch it in your home because it was made for the big screen. It was made to be in a big room, big bright projector, completely dark, and the like flashing and the song was supposed to really like make you sort of like nauseous and just give you this eerie feeling. And you do sort of get that when you really watch intensely. I watched with like the lights out in a dim room, so it kind of gave me that feeling. But if you really want the full Silver Shamrock jingle experience, you have to watch it in a dark room with a big screen that's super loud and just really get like blasted with that jingle. And as the movie progresses, we get to sort of see what the plan would be like if Cochran is successful with this mask takeover. That was a pun, mask takeover. You're welcome. One of the women staying at the hotel that Dr. Chalice and Ellie are also staying at finds one of these Silver Shamrock sort of medallions in her motel room, and when she goes and picks it up, she sees that there's like a chip on the back of it. So she takes out one of her hairpins and she's sort of messing with it to see what the chip does, and it basically shoots her in the face with like a laser beam, and it like peels back her lips and like sinks her eyes in, and then like a spider crawls out of her mouth. And about 4 hours later, the authorities show up, and it's like 1 a.m. and Conrad Cochran was the one who came to get her, which raises suspicion for Dr. Chalice and Ellie, because they're like, why was it not medics that arrived but the Silver Shamrock CEO? Like, why would he show up on a scene like this in the middle of the night for something that sort of seems completely unrelated to him? So that really sparks their suspicion, and they go to the factory where Colonel Cochran is just being super nice to them and super like, there's nothing to worry about here. And at the same time, there's another family that's touring. They've got their son with them. The guy is like a big businessman. And while we think that family is there because the father is going to be working on a commercial for Silver Shamrock and he also purchases masks from them, their true purpose is a little more sinister. As Colonel Cochran realizes Dr. Chalice and Ellie are sort of figuring out his plan, he kidnaps both of them. He ends up killing Ellie and then turning her into one of his robots, and then he makes Dr. Chalice watch what happens whenever the masks reach their full potential. So he locks this family into this room where he tells them we'll be right back, and then we'll start discussing this commercial. The kid has one of the masks, he's got the pumpkin mask on, and they turn on the TV and it starts playing a little jingle, and it's, you know, like, sit down kiddos, put your masks on, turn up the TV, and watch our special program. So the kid puts on the mask, he's watching the TV, and the husband and wife are on the couch sort of talking. She's laughing and being like, this is ridiculous, this place is creepy, I'm gonna get out of here. And the husband's like, oh, he wants my advice and my help, let's just stay, see what he's got to say. And then as the jingle is playing, their son collapses to the floor, grabbing his head, and we don't see what happens inside the mask, but basically his head caves in, and then all these bugs and snakes are crawling out of his face. And the wife passes out. We assume she probably is killed later on, and the dad gets attacked by the snakes that came out of the head. And the entire time Dr. Chalice is watching this, just totally mortified, and that's when Colonel Cochran goes on like his big monologue of how evil we are, and we don't see Halloween for what it's supposed to be, and he's going to take back Halloween for the traditions it's supposed to be like, yada yada yada. Basically the whole, here's the evil villain revealing his evil plan to the hero. And Dr. Chalice is then locked into a room with one of the masks on, and they turn on the TV, and it's Halloween day, so they're like, we're counting down until you got like 4 hours until our program, and then you're gonna be one of the people that gets their head caved in. Dr. Chalice does end up escaping, and he finds Ellie and grabs her, and they take a big box of all of these medallions with the chips in them, and they go up to like the rafters in the warehouse and dump it all over the henchmen. And just the reaction of the TVs that are going on, and then like the medallions causes all the henchmen to get like electrocuted, and then the power of the medallions and then the power of the big Stonehenge thing basically melts Colonel Cochran's character. He turns into like stone and then like crumbles. I don't really know what happens to his body, but we know that he is dead and that his henchmen are dead, but there's still this program that's going to be playing at 9 o'clock on Halloween night, and all these children with these masks So we have like 2-ish hours left before basically mass murder happens across the country. And as we're driving back into towns, when we find out that Ellie was replaced with a robot, so we aren't really sure if she's dead or not. We never see her death, but we also never see her human body again. So you can only assume that she was killed. And after Dr. Chalice kills off the robot, he drives to a local gas station where he starts calling all of these network channels. He's like, you've got to turn off that program. I know I don't have proof, but you have to stop it. Something terrible is going to happen if this program gets aired. And as the TV's on, it starts to play, and then he sees it gets cut off with a standby message. We're having technical difficulties. They switch the channel. Same thing. All of these channels are starting to have technical difficulties. They put up standby notices. But the movie ends sort of on a cliffhanger. We have Dr. Chalice screaming into the phone, turn it off, stop it, stop it. There's still at least one channel that has the program running, and we never find out if they got it off in time. Tom Atkins, who plays Dr. Chalice, did say that they shot a few different endings with this movie, so he wasn't even sure what the final ending would be. He was hoping that his character's efforts wouldn't all be in vain. From what I've read, there was supposed to be, after the screen cuts to black, just the screams of children, like hundreds, millions of children screaming, which was going to signify that he didn't get the program turned off in time and that millions of children across the country died. The only reason they cut that was they felt it was too extreme for the movie, that it was going to be like too much to have just this like guttural scream of children happening after the screen goes black. So they did cut that part out, but it just leaves that question of, okay, so are they alive or are they not? Dr. Chalice's children also had masks. He had a lot at stake with this. So it's sort of, you're left hoping that he was able to get all the programs to turn it off in time, but there was still one on when the screen went black, so we don't really know. And I think that's a really successful and cool way to end the movie, because it leaves that question of, well, did he do it, or did all those children just die? It definitely works well as a standalone movie. It's really, honestly, a successful movie in of itself. At least I think so. There are a few parts that seem maybe like a little bit drawn out. They go on a little bit long. It's not a super gory movie. It's not a slasher at all. It's more, like I said, sort of like sci-fi. We do see a few gory moments, like when Ellie's dad is killed in the hospital, his skull is crushed in, and the henchman like sticks his fingers in his eyes and basically like pulls his skull from the inside. So like that's kind of a fun death. And then the woman in the hotel room who gets shot in the face with the like beam, her lips get peeled back. She looks super creepy and gross. But the death that occur with the masks, we don't see what happens inside the mask. We just see like the collapsing skull and then all the bugs and snakes come out. So we aren't really sure how they're dying, and we don't really get to see it happening. And then the henchmen are robots, so robots don't bleed. They just have this like weird orangey stuff that comes out of them, which was orange juice concentrate, and then wires. So we don't have like gory, bloody, axe killings or anything like that, but we do have a decent amount of intriguing deaths. And that was just another thing people sort of had issues with, was this wasn't a slasher gory movie like the other Halloween movies. It was more on the low-key side in that sense. It relied more on the story than anything, which some people love and some people hate. So it saw criticism from both angles. And while there are parts that are sort of drawn out, the story itself is really interesting. It's unique, it's new, it's nothing we'd seen before, and I think it's a successful, cool Halloween movie. We get a total of 21 deaths, only like 9 if you count Ellie, who we don't fully confirm is dead, are human. The rest are the henchmen that died whenever they dumped all the medallions on them, and then the robot Ellie, who gets killed in the end. But we only ever get 8 to 9 human deaths, assuming that the children at the end weren't all murdered. And really, none of them are super gory. One of the women who works at the hospital, who's the one sifting through the ashes of the car accident, gets drilled through the ear by one of the henchmen, but we don't see the drill go in her ear. We just see it like he, gets close to her ear, and then it cuts back and just shows him on top of her, and you hear it go into her head, but you don't see it. So even that being the potential goriest death, we don't really get to see it. So this movie didn't have a ton of gore. As far as the gore rating would go for this movie, I'd have to rate it gore-esque. It wasn't intended to be a slasher, so in that sense it did pull that off, I love a little bit of blood and gore in my horror movies, so I would have loved to see a little bit of that, but I also understand that this movie wasn't about the gore and the slashing, it was about the plot, essentially. So while I'm giving it a gore-esque rating, which is technically lower on the scale, it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. This movie wasn't meant to be super gory, and that's what it was. It wasn't super gory. My favorite kill, it's hard. I really love the effects that happen whenever the woman in the motel room gets shot in the face, like the way her lips peel back. It's super creepy and her face just looks scary. But I also love the idea of the mask melding your head and snakes and bugs coming out of it. So I'm kind of tied between how her face was sort of peeled back because of the electric shock of the medallion versus the little kid whose head collapsed in with the bugs and snakes. But it feels wrong to like the little kid's death. So I'll put both of them up there. They're both really cool, interesting deaths that we haven't really seen before in horror movies. And honestly, I think my biggest issue with this movie is the relationship between Dr. Chalice and Ellie, mainly because her father was killed in this hospital bed. She teams up with the doctor to try to go stop whatever's happening with the Silver Shamrock Company. They're about 2 days into knowing each other, and they end up having sex in the hotel room. And I get that sex sells, and it's not a horror movie if there isn't a sex scene. But if my father had been murdered, and there's a potential that this company is going to commit mass murder with a bunch of children, I don't know if my top priority would be having sex with the doctor I just met. I don't know. I think I'd still be reeling and horribly sad over the death of my father. That's just me. But they are the first night in their hotel room. They only got one room. It only had one bed. It's a small town. And the doctor does say, he's like, if you want me to sleep like in the car, on the floor, just let me know. It's totally cool. And she's like, well, where do you want to sleep, doctor? And he's all like, well, that's a stupid question, Ellie. And then like the next scene is them having sex. So I'm not sold on that relationship. He's divorced with 2 kids, and his ex-wife is like bitching at him because he can never commit to the kids. He constantly is telling them, oh, I'll come pick them up, I'll come do this with them. Like, he's a drunk, he never shows up on time. He apparently like takes people from the hospital out on dates all the time. Like, he's sort of a player. So I would understand him trying to pull a move on her, but I'm like, as the Ellie character, I don't think I'd be like, my top priority isn't some hot love affair with the doctor in this motel room. It's my father's been murdered and we're trying to figure it out. Can you keep it in your pants for 10 damn minutes? That also could just be me. I don't know. That's my biggest beef with the movie, though, is their like super quick sexual relationship, and then they have sex a couple other times and he acts all like, oh, don't you ever get tired, or it's sex to have sex in a movie. Not my favorite. I could go without it. I'm here for the blood and gore, but you know, it's not so terrible that it makes me not like the movie. It's just a scene that I'm going to roll my eyes and laugh at whenever I watch it. But as far as being on the list, I definitely think this movie deserves to be on the list. It deserves to be a little bit more well known than it is. I want people to pull it out of the stigma of the Halloween movies and sort of let it be its own creation. Honestly, I would have loved to see John Carpenter put out a different Halloween movie every year that was completely different and something that we had never seen before, with new characters and a new story. It's almost like the Black Mirror TV series. It would be something kind of like that, and I'm a little bit sad that John Carpenter never got a chance to really pursue that because of the high demand for Michael Myers, but that's also, I guess, what you get when you create such an iconic horror movie character. So if you haven't seen Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, because it's a movie that doesn't have Michael Myers in it, I still definitely encourage you to go out and watch it. It's well worth the watch and could be a fun new movie to watch around Halloween time. If you have seen it, I'd love to know what your thoughts are. You can leave a comment down below or head over to my Instagram, What a Horror. I'll be making a post about this video as well. But as always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos. I put out new videos every Friday. And until next time, stay spooky.